Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our webinar hosted by the University of Calgary on tips for parenting during school closures and how to help your children who are at home with the work that they have to continue to do. My name is Deborah Gedlin. I'm the Chancellor of the University, and I'm going to be moderating today's session. Please submit the questions during the webinar to our by using the Q&A feature that is at the bottom of your screen, and you can actually direct it to Barbara or myself. There's a way to select different panelists to direct the question to different people. But this is really about trying to answer as many questions as we possibly can during this presentation. And this again, this is being recorded, so people will be able to watch it later as well. So our speaker today is Dr. Barbara Brown. She's an assistant professor and director of the Professional Graduate Programs in Education and Partner Research at the University of Calgary's Workland School of Education. Her research focuses on educational technology. She started her education career with a degree in education from the University of Lethbridge in 1991 with a major in math and a minor in physical sciences, and did her master's at the University of Alberta and then did her PhD at the University of Calgary. Following her studies, she was awarded the postdoctoral fellowship of the Gallagher Galileo Fellowship, and which focused on design-based professional teaching and learning for professional teachers, and continues with that work in the design focus as part of her research. So she's going to give us a quick presentation of about 7 minutes and talk about, give us some ideas on what we need to be doing, what parents need to be doing with their children at home. And then we'll have questions from the audience. So I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Barbara Brown. Over to you.
Great, thank you, Deborah. I'm going to share some slides. I'm hoping you can see my slides okay. So thank you for joining us today. I hope to share with you some tips from parents. This is coming from my own experience as a parent and having children at home right now working with me, as well as my experience in research and teaching in schools. So first I want to start by encouraging you to remind yourself about what makes you a great parent. So I looked at a gift that I received from my daughter, which listed some of the things that she thought made me a great mom. So this comes from a few years ago, but I picked it up, and when I looked at what she had listed, I thought, what a great reminder of the things that I need to make sure that I keep focusing on. So I know that we are experiencing some really challenging times right now, and it will be so important that we make sure that we are taking care of those around us, taking care of ourselves and taking care of our families most importantly. So I ask you to remind yourself about those things and keep doing the great things that you are already doing as a parent. My key message to you is that you don't need to turn your home into a home school, that your child is already learning alongside you and will continue learning. Now, as you are working with your children at home, what I've noticed on a lot of social media is that many parents are posting schedules that they've created for their children. So I asked my daughter if she wanted to create a schedule, and she did. She put one together, and I thought it was really interesting when I looked at her schedule. First, I imagined it to be a Monday to Friday schedule, but instead, no, her schedule went throughout the week, and it didn't start at the same time that school normally starts. Instead, she wanted to start at 10 o'clock, and I thought, well, for a preteen, it's probably not a bad idea to get some sleep in time. And so when I look at the schedule, I thought, I need to be flexible too in my thinking around what a schedule could look like. Is the schedule flexible? Absolutely. Has she followed it to a T? No. But some of the things that are on it, she has made efforts to do. So I recommend encouraging play and creativity. I would say those are the number two item, or two top items that I saw on many of the schedules that I saw that were shared on social media. But I also saw a lot of breaks, and it's really important to take a lot of breaks. You can't sit in front of the computer from 8:30 to 3:30 just because that was the school day. And I can't imagine that the teachers will be assigning work or engaged in live sessions that would have your child in front of a screen for that lengthy period of time. So it's important to consider how you will manage to help your children take the needed breaks. One of the other items that I recommend is creating a learning space with your child. So find out where in the home you might have space where you would do your work and where your children are going to do their work. We're all in the home doing work now, so we might have spaces that we're going to schedule and use at different times, dependent on our needs. And so it's important to figure out where those spaces might be. They might be a little bit different than the spaces we used for the typical homework in the evenings or weekends. So we need to figure out what those learning spaces might be and need to be flexible and accommodating for the different schedules. Take this time to really enjoy the flexible routines. So normally, my daughter has piano lessons. Well, the teacher can't come to the house to do the piano lesson, but figured out, they both figured out how to use Zoom for the piano lesson, had it set up, and the piano lesson still happened. So I think it's important that we look at different ways, and perhaps this might be an impetus for change. When a child is sick or is unable to go to a lesson, maybe there's a different way that we could do things. I also think it's really important to discuss responsible online activity. We know from our research, a recent study that I was involved in with 9 to 11-year-olds, where we were looking at their social media use. We found that kids in this age group are using social media. So even though cell phones might be banned at school and social media might not be used at school, and even though most of the terms of agreement for social media applications require 13 years of age or older, we found that the 9 to 11-year-olds were using social media. They have accounts, they're using them to create things, they're communicating with others, even though they shouldn't be because of the age restriction from those companies. And perhaps as parents, we might not even know all of the applications that they have accounts on, but they're using them. And so I think it's really important that we have conversations with our children to find out what are they using, how are they using these, and how can we make sure that they are using them in responsible ways. Another possible conversation that I think is important to have is around the schoolwork that the children are doing. So for example, yesterday my daughter was working on a project with one of her friends from her class, and she sent an email to the teacher wondering, is it okay that we work together? So even though the teacher had not assigned the particular activity as a paired activity or group activity, she was wondering, is it okay that, we're FaceTiming and working on this activity at the same time in a shared Google Doc? And so I think it's important to talk to your children about this. And if they're unsure, they can ask the teacher and find out, is it okay that this activity is worked on together? Really important to balance that screen time. We know, again, from the research that the children who are using social media are using it much more during the evenings and weekends, so the out of school time. And so now that we're at home the whole time, we need to make sure that we're not on the screen the whole time. So as a parent, if you're finding that what's being assigned to your child is providing too much screen time, then those are conversations that you need to have with the teacher, with the school, to figure out a way to balance it. Really important that we're balancing that screen time with some physical activity. So I know that we are trying to have physical distancing, but we want to make sure that we're not having social distancing online. It's really important for the children to also keep connected with their peers. And so we do want them to have some screen time and to keep those connections, keep those relationships going. And I'll take this from the Frozen movie, just because we've been watching a lot of movies at home as well. Do the next best thing. So, normally I would love to have my mom come over, or we would go visit her. She lives in another city. My father recently passed away, so my mom's on her own, and we would love to have her right next to us, but we can't. And so the next best thing is to connect with her, to make sure that we're connecting with others, take advantage of their skills. So my mom's a fantastic cook. And so she did some baking with my daughter the other day, and we were able to, enjoy watching her show my daughter how to knead bread properly, and make some beautiful buns for us to enjoy. So I think we need to take this, constraint that we have and use it as an enabling constraint. Use it as a way to maybe do some of the things that we wouldn't have had an opportunity to do during the daytime, and now we do. And most of all, have fun. Take this opportunity with your family. This could be a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to really connect and spend time with our families, to do things a little bit differently. And so make sure it's fun. The children need that. And then lastly, I recommend that we just take one day at a time. And if we, need help or know someone that needs help, let's make sure that we're being those helpers. My mom always says that, in times of need, always look for the helpers. They're always around. And so let's make sure that we are those helpers, and we are seeking helpers when we need them. So be mindful of your children. They likely have a lot of worries. They're hearing about what's happening on the news. They may want to have conversations with you to learn more about it. If you need support, there are a lot of supports in the community to help you through this time. So don't be afraid to ask for help if you need it. Okay, so that's the end of my presentation.
So we already have questions up. I just thought that that picture with the watermelon and the carrots, that could be a physics experiment.
Yes, it could.
It's mass, it's how do you distribute weight, and you could actually have fun timing how long the watermelon could be supported by the carrot sticks. It's actually, something that you could apply by going through your produce drawer. So it's all about creativity and learning. So one of the questions has come up, and of course you've touched on it, is this a time to relax screen limitations? And can you comment on how much is too much?
Mm-hmm. So this is a really good question in terms of how much time is too much time. And, and I get this question a lot, even around how much time should we allocate for learning? How much time should we allocate for screen time? And there is no one single right answer. I think as a family, you need to figure out what works best for you and for your children. So for example, with the school time allocation, Alberta Education has provided a fantastic document. So, I applaud those in the ministry that have put together a guideline for our school authorities, indicating that, learning time for those in between kindergarten and grade 6 should be about approximately 5 hours per week. Those in junior high, we're looking at a little bit more, approximately 10 hours. And then those in high school, about 3 hours per core subject that they're taking during the term. So they've provided a bit of a guideline. In terms of screen time, I would look at it as how much screen time does my child normally have on, during a weekday? So in the evening, after school, after dance lessons, piano lessons, all of that, how much screen time does she really have? I wouldn't want to see more screen time than what was normal on a normal weeknight. being had during the day. So I would judge it on that. I would also ask the children to help self-monitor. So I know that with the app, it usually will tell them how much screen time they've had in the week. Ask them, what would be reasonable for you? How much time do you think you need to have to make sure that you're keeping those connections with friends?
So I just wanted to touch on what you said, the Alberta Ed piece. They also say that depending on the grade, they expect that the teachers will work with the students and their parents on the delivery of the materials and make sure that everything's covered. How do we have the capacity? Like, how do you see that unfolding? And what do you see as the potential challenges to actually following through on those guidelines?
Mm-hmm. So I see it really similar to how we currently handle homework. So when our children bring home work that they need to complete, or in some classes using a flipped learning approach where materials are provided in advance of the learning, at home, we are making provisions for that learning to occur. And so if the children are, asking questions and they're unsure about what they're supposed to do, we're not doing the work for them. Instead, we're helping them to help articulate what the question is that they might ask, so that they can then go and ask the teacher that particular question. So I don't think it's changed the role or responsibility of parents to help support the children. We're not in the position to do the work for them. I know sometimes it's really tempting, especially with science experiments, things like that, to take on some of that work at home and want to do it and make it the very best. But I think it's really important that we step back and we let them work through the challenges. Yesterday, my daughter was working with her friend trying to figure out, they were problem solving how to upload files when using a Google Chromebook. And again, I could have jumped in, helped solve the problem, but I thought, no, I need to step back and let them do the problem solving. And if they can't figure it out, then help them figure out how to ask for the help that they need or search out the help that they need. So I don't think it changes what we need to do as parents, as partners in the learning.
So I know I've been on conference calls already the last little while where there's, the other person on the other end is trying to manage their kids while dealing with the work, and how do you balance it? And I guess the question is, there's a range, obviously, in terms of the kids that need help versus in terms of their age. So how do you support the younger kids in their play and their learning? And how do we best sort of spend the time fulfilling the needs of our jobs so that we can also work? And so do you have any tips in terms of how to deal with probably the younger cohort? Like, it sounds like your daughter's at an age where she's a little bit more self-sufficient, but let's say 9 and under, what do you suggest to make sure we optimize both?
Yeah, with younger children, I know it's much more difficult, and I too was at home with younger children when working on my doctorate, and and try to do that work while having a young child at home. And this is where I needed to really be flexible again with my schedule, and and not look at my work day as 8:30 to 3:30, or whatever the time frame you would normally have for your school day or your work day. And so I tried to find times that would work best for me, which meant that maybe I was waking up earlier in the morning before the children would wake up and doing some of the work during that time, or maybe later in the evening worked better for me. And so this is where I think we need to have conversations in our workplaces as well, to make sure that we are accommodating for those that do have young children at home, to figure out what hours might work best for them. Having a meeting in the middle of the day, having a Zoom call where we're, all required to connect, might not work for everybody. And so maybe it's a matter of, can we record some of these meetings so that they can access them later on their own time when the children have gone to bed, and, can review the information. This is where I think we really need to work together. Colleagues who, can maybe support and answer email or answer phone calls during the day, can maybe help those that need to have a more flexible schedule and can maybe do other tasks at off times.
So there's an interesting question that's come up. It's about high school diploma exams and IB exams being canceled, which is unprecedented. but the parent is concerned about how they ensure their children are caught up and prepared for university. Remember that in 2013, some diploma exams were also canceled, but I think there were 3 or 4 left at the end of that school year. This is everything. And so how do you make sure that the material's covered, that they're prepared to enter university if that's where they're headed? And do you see this potentially as compromising their admission to university if the universities were waiting for the second semester marks?
So, I was delighted to see that the diploma exams were canceled, to be honest. I think it's one more stress that we can remove for our children. It's a one-time exam. It does not capture all of the curricular outcomes for any given subject that is being tested. So it's one sitting. It captures only some of the learning outcomes. The teachers have been working with the children for at least part of the semester already. So there might be some learning outcomes that were not covered, and I would imagine that those are the ones that the teachers will be focusing on in terms of assignments and learning activities that they're providing for the children to complete over the remainder of the term. Many of our post-secondaries look at grade 11 marks when they're doing their admissions. Many of the students haven't completed their coursework by the time they're actually applying to get into post-secondary. So do I think it will limit them in terms of their applications? Absolutely not. Do I think it will limit them when they begin post-secondary? I don't think it will either. Our teachers are highly trained in being able to recognize if there are gaps in learning and being able to support students with identifying what those gaps are and working on them. And so I have no doubt that our high school teachers are working really hard to make sure that the students are best prepared for whatever they decide to do after high school.
So another participant just said, what about, that math 30-1 gives them heart palpitations and very worried that their daughter won't be able to get the support they need. Is there, other than the teachers, what other resources are there for kids that need to get the extra help that they require to get through these courses?
Mm-hmm. So many of the jurisdictions have also provided links with additional resources. So on the Alberta Education website, where you see the guidelines that are provided for the different grade levels, some of the jurisdictions have already provided links for us with additional resources. And I would highly recommend going to those first. The jurisdictions have gone through those links, have decided that they are best for the children in their school divisions. And so I would say that would be a great starting point. I know that right now in social media, we are bombarded with the number of websites and resources that students and parents might access. So, I recommend, going to the jurisdiction resources first, seeing what they recommend. You can also click on some of the other school jurisdictions and see what they're providing, and those might provide additional resources. I would say that would be the starting point, and not to feel that you need to purchase any programs or additional resources. There are so many out there that are being offered for free that I think that would be suitable and plenty to be able to support anything in addition that your child might need.
So one of the comments has been that there's lots of resources for younger kids, but what about resources for teens that actually enriches them, but is not necessarily too homework related? Do you have any thoughts, or is there something you may be able to post later on the website so people can look at that?
Yeah, and again, the school jurisdictions have done a great job in providing links for different grade levels and age groups. So, I recommend looking at that. One particular one, and we can post this link later, is the Learn Alberta. Also has where you can search by grade level and by discipline. That also provides some resources that may be useful to parents.
So someone's just asked a question about their son is feeling depressed, has low energy and low mood, low appetite, and he wants to sleep a lot since school ended. There obviously it's difficult to motivate him, and I guess that's, you know, that social structure, that social interaction is just completely fallen away. And whereas the parents are interacting with their work colleagues, it's different for kids. So any suggestions in terms of how to help him get out of this rut?
Mhm. And so I think that's something that we need to keep an eye on with our children to see if there's any changes in their regular mood or behavior. And if there is, then we do need to seek support. So I know Alberta Health has provided supports, and I know that the schools are also sending communications as to how you can access support through the schools. Now, many of our schools this week are on spring break, and so some children may not have received instruction yet from their teachers in their schools. And so if it is your spring break, then use it as a break. And, and don't worry about, getting set up for learning today, or, having activities that your children are doing. They might just need time to rest
Sure.
and absorb this change. Perhaps you had a vacation plan during spring break and now you're not going on that vacation. So, you can understand how that's going to cause some change in mood and perhaps anxiety. And so, I highly recommend that, you reach out to those sources either through Alberta Health or through your school division to see, are there resources that they can provide, or it might be the school counselor giving your child a call and talking over the phone and to see if there's something or a support that they can provide.
That's a really good point. Just, this is spring break. Let it be spring break, even though it's not what it was expected to be. So that's actually something that everybody should keep in mind. Someone else has a question about their son has extra needs and is used to having an aide. And this individual also has some learning needs a lot of time to get into the deep thinking of their work. And she is, or he is, struggling with the noise and the busyness and the diaper changes during the day. And they're also getting ready for their PhD candidacy exam. So any tips that you might be able to answer and give to this individual?
Mm-hmm. And so, it's really difficult. I'm thinking of some of the children that I've had in classes that I've taught when I taught grade 2, and, had a sign language interpreter that, basically followed me around the classroom the whole time to make sure that, she was signing whatever I was saying. And I was thinking back to how would I handle that today? How would we manage to be able to support children in that particular situation? Or, I had another student with cerebral palsy that had some very high needs in the classroom. What I can say is that our schools, with the educational assistants that are there, again, provide tremendous supports to the children in the classroom. And I know they are working really hard to figure out ways to be able to support you at home. So again, if you are on spring break, it might be that you haven't received some information from your school yet. Those of you that have received information from your school, I know that schools are reaching out and asking for, what kinds of supports do you need? And so I recommend that you outline what some of the supports are that you might need. So you might need to find out, what was it that they did at school, that helped my child, so I could maybe do some of those things at home. Or think about, what do you normally do at home that helps your child? So, maybe your child works really well in solitude for a particular period of time. And so you might need to do that. So again, just use the strategies that already work well for you, and make sure you are reaching out to the schools to seek whatever support they might be able to provide. So it might be some tips they're providing, or, I'm not sure what other supports might be in place that they might be able to, or that you might be able to access. But I understand it's very difficult when, you're supporting a number of children, or supporting children that have diverse needs.
So one of the questions I wanted to ask was also about, when you have children with ADD or ADHD, the school provides a specific structure for them and it tends to be helpful. Now that structure is gone. So, A, children with learning differences, but B, also, the ADD, ADHD diagnosis, which is increased, how to help those kids make sure that they can do the work they need to do, not be too disruptive, but also, be able to meet the curriculum that's sent home.
Mhm. And again, I'll emphasize that if they're unable to do all of the activities that are assigned from the teacher, from the school, that, have a conversation with the teacher, have a conversation with the school, and see if you can find a balance to what might be reasonable for your child. Again, when they provide a guideline on the number of hours, it's a guideline. Your child might need maybe a few more hours or a few less hours to accomplish those tasks. And so when a child has difficulties at home in terms of accomplishing the task, it can become really stressful for everyone in the home environment. And so it's really important to have those conversations to see, can we make some accommodations? Like, maybe they don't need to do all of these different tasks that have been assigned. Which ones can we prioritize and maybe do first? And if they don't accomplish all of those tasks, as I said, our teachers are well equipped in the new year. When they see your child again in school, they are equipped to identify what the gaps in learning are and will be able to support your child. They already do that. There already are a range of learners in a classroom and a range of learning abilities. And so we need to trust that they will be there to support us when we return to school.
What about having older siblings helping to teach their younger siblings? Somebody asked whether they should get their son, who's in grade 6, help their daughter in grade 1 with her reading. What do you think about that?
Mm-hmm. So that's definitely a possibility. And again, your family best, your children best. We also know that when we're teaching someone else to do something, we can learn it much better for ourselves. And so, having an older child maybe do some paired reading with a younger sibling could be a great way that, they can practice their reading skills, and the younger child can benefit from also the closeness of having that sibling there and supporting them. So if there's opportunity to learn together, I would say take advantage of that.
Okay, so one of the things, you obviously mentioned, if it's spring break, some people say they haven't received any homework yet for their children. So it's spring break. Let's let spring break be spring break. But I'm curious, as we talk about limits for kids for screen time, etc. What kind of limits should parents set for themselves in terms of their involvement with the schoolwork? Should it be, let's just go over what your assignment is, and then off you go, and if you have trouble, call, let me know if you need any help? Or how should that be structured? Because obviously parents need limits too in order to let the children do the work that they need to do, and that way they can also focus on their individual tasks that they may have to do for work or other things.
Exactly. And so, if we've been provided with a guideline that our child might receive approximately 5 hours of work to do schoolwork during the week, that doesn't mean that the parent now has 5 hours of schoolwork to do with their child. It is not necessary to be sitting beside, even for our very young children, in kindergarten and grade 1, there are tasks that they can do independently. The parent doesn't need to be doing it with them. It would be impossible for the teacher in the classroom to be sitting beside every single child and doing the work with them. So the tasks that the teachers are going to provide are going to be tasks that your children should be able to do. They're not tasks for you to do. They're not tasks for you to correct and make sure get sent back with 100% correct. I think it's important that we let the children do the work. We let them submit the work to the teachers, receive that feedback, make changes based on the feedback they receive. It's a process for learning that they need to experience. And so I can't emphasize enough that this is not parent work.
Right.
It would be school work for the children.
So what you're saying is no helicoptering.
That's right.
Check it and then let them take off, so to speak.
Exactly.
Do you have any recommendations for sleep and wake time? And I'm just curious, actually, I want to take that one step further. You mentioned earlier about your daughter setting her schedule to sleep in a little bit. So what do you see as reasonable in that context? But also, do you see this as a step towards being able to better assess the school day and maybe shifting it as a result of what we're experiencing now to better meet the circadian rhythms of the kids, especially the teenagers?
You know, I'm really hopeful that that this will be, you know, an enabling constraint, as I said before, where we can really look at this as an opportunity to, you know, reevaluate some of the structures that we've had in place for so long, to consider different ways of doing things. So, for example, in our high schools, we've had the Carnegie Unit that has provided a structure. Now, what it is you know, 25 hours that should be allocated to every credit in high school. And so we've structured timetables in high schools, you know, based on that Carnegie Unit, and indicated this is the amount of time that, you know, each individual learning math needs based on the credits and these hours. Well, recently, the government removed the requirement for the Carnegie Unit, excuse me. And so high schools are no longer required to adhere to that Carnegie Unit. So in 2008, we had a pilot group of schools that tried this out. And then a few years later, a research team, and I was part of the research team, conducted research with 7 high schools in the province that had removed the Carnegie Unit. And we were pleasantly surprised to find that because of the removal of that one structure, these schools started to rethink high school schedules. They started to rethink what would it look like if we allow students to have more flexibility in their schedule, to take the time they need to learn. So if they need more than 25 hours per credit, then how can we allow for more time? If they need less, how can we allow for less time? We also found that many of the teachers in these schools started to design learning in interdisciplinary ways. So they started to, you know, think out of the box in terms of what learning could look like. And so I'm excited about the possibilities for, you know, challenging some of our assumptions and some of our current structures, and thinking about what could we do a little bit different, whether you know, we're forced to be at home and, you know, everyone learning online all of a sudden, or whether we might have some options to employ some of these strategies, and, you know, and maybe have more blended learning models, or, you know, as you mentioned, flexible schedules to allow for learning to take place at different times.
Somebody just asked a question. What is the Carnegie Unit, or what was the Carnegie Unit?
Yeah, so the Carnegie Unit is a requirement of the number of hours associated with every credit unit in high school. So that's what determined, you know, how many blocks of math or English or physics that you needed to have in your high school schedule. It was based on this Carnegie Unit. And so that's why you had, you know, sometimes you would have a double block of math, and then another day you would have a single block, and added together, those added to the number of hours that were required for each of the subject areas. And so that's how the schedules were designed in high school. And in Alberta, you know, we're in the process of removing that in high schools. And like I said, many of the high schools at the time we did the study, over 250 high schools in the province were already removing that Carnegie Unit. And as I said, 7 of those schools were part of our study, where we went in more depth to find out what they were doing.
So it really is about being able to let students progress at their own pace.
Progress at their own pace, but also have that flexibility. So, you know, a student who might need more time, some of the schools were putting in flexible structures where students could meet with their teachers and access support when they needed it. Rather than just waiting for that scheduled time in, you know, in their daily schedule to go and access that support.
Do you have any thoughts about, you know, there's a single parent with one child? How should they manage the need to work from home? and interact with their child who obviously needs more interaction because he doesn't have another sibling, maybe not, doesn't have a pet. And then this gets back to the screen time piece too, right? So how do you sort of, if you're dealing with that, how do you have any ideas on how to balance all that?
Mhm. And, and that's definitely, a challenge to think about. And this is where, as a community, I think we need to make sure that we are helping those around us. So making sure that we're reaching out to our colleagues that might need extra supports because they are a single parent at home with children. That this is where the schools can also support. So again, recognizing that some parents might need more support than others. I know that one of the schools had sent out a survey asking questions to find out exactly what supports you would need as a parent. I don't know if all schools are doing this, but I thought it was a fabulous idea to find out what are some of the specific needs that that family might have. So they were, asking questions about whether, you have Wi-Fi, what kind of devices you have, what other kinds of supports your child might need. So I thought, what a great way to find out individually what families might need. And again, together as a community, we need to think about how can we support. I know in social media, some authors have publicized how they're reading some of their novels, some of their books online at certain times. So maybe looking at how can we all support with the gifts and talents that we have. How can we maybe share to provide some breaks or opportunities for those that might need that support.
Some of the high school students and some of the, obviously in the upper grades, they're really trying to facilitate the classes through Zoom and other methods. But I'm guessing that might not be as much in place for the junior high and the elementary students. And that's sometimes those are the children that need that stimulation and need to be connected. What else should the schools be doing? Should parents be convening something? Should the teachers be thinking about that in a different context? Because I think that face-to-face connection is so important, even if they do it online. Is that something that needs to be thought of more deliberately beyond, high school is a given? What about the lower grades?
Mm-hmm. And I think there's opportunity for, both synchronous connections. So when we're meeting at the same time and live and, maybe through Zoom or other applications, but also looking at our asynchronous connections. So those connections that we can make using other media. So, I know that some teachers have created videos. Some teachers are using TikTok to create videos, knowing that, many of the children are using that application. Think of different ways that that you can be connected with homes, and and not feeling like it all has to be live and face to face, because I think that we are going to have difficulty if every single teacher is expecting to connect live during the times they would normally have their class. Then our children are going to be sitting in front of the screen the whole day. And so I think we need to balance that as well and make sure that we're looking at both synchronous and asynchronous opportunities for connection. It was interesting yesterday when my daughter was reading one of the messages from one of her teachers, and they're using D2L. And so the teacher had posted a message in the news items in D2L. And I thought it was really interesting that, her comment was, I think the teacher is actually more enthusiastic teaching this way. And, and she mentioned that from having read a message. So it wasn't hearing the teacher's voice. It was reading what the teacher wrote and the links that the teacher had provided and the way in which that she expressed herself. And I thought, okay, it'd be interesting that both our children and the teachers will have different ways to communicate and, and express, what they're saying with the children, that, they might find that the connections are even stronger.
I noticed the TikTok slot on your daughter's schedule. I thought that was pretty cool. So I'm curious, you talked about design learning and interdisciplinary learning, and how can parents sort of facilitate some of that in everyday tasks or activities in the house? Because the interdisciplinary world is actually where we're going. And so how do you sort of get people to think, how do you sort of help that foster that integrative thinking at home?
Mm-hmm. So, when you looked at that picture of the watermelon with the carrots,
Yeah.
there is an opportunity, right, to think about how can we have this, this experiment turn into something that we can start talking about math at the same time. So, so can interdisciplinary happen at home with some of our everyday activities? Absolutely. It probably already does. So I encourage you to think about what are your children passionate about and build on those passions. This is such an opportunity for children that have a real interest in a particular topic to explore it in more depth and to look at how can we make connections in different ways. So this might be where you might help bring in some of those different disciplinary connections once they've thought of what they might want to do. So maybe they're really into building trains, so let them build that train track, and then maybe talk about speed or distance, or see if you could do some experiments with the train. So think about what you have in your home already, what you're already doing, what your child is passionate about doing, and build on those experiences.
Just as you talk about trains, I'm thinking about supply chain. So the whole business side of it, there's the physics side of the train, and then there's the whole business side of the train. How does a train contribute to our overall economic activity in the country? Somebody asked, can you just describe D2L and how it works?
Sure. So Desire to Learn, Brightspace, is what's called a learning management system. And I know when I was part of a school district, we were using it already many years ago with our high school students, and now junior high students are using it as well. In some districts, even elementary students are using it. The program allows for a secure space where teachers can post messages. So there, as I mentioned before, there's a news area where teachers can post messages on, a daily or weekly basis, however they wish. They can communicate with students. So at, one click of a button, you can send an email message out to all of the students in your class. You can post content. And so students can access different links or documents that the teacher has provided in a really nice, organized fashion in the content area. There's also discussion forums, so there's opportunity for that asynchronous discussion that can occur. D2L has continually, Canadian-made company, by the way, D2L has continually added different features. And so, for example, in the discussion forum, you can leave written messages or audio, video messages. So I know with my students, I will often, when they're handing in assignments in the Dropbox, so there's a Dropbox feature where they can, again, securely submit an assignment. I will often ask them to submit assignments in different formats. And so if they submit an assignment in a podcast format, then I will give my feedback in a podcast format. Or if they, send me a video, then I give them a feedback video. So there's different multimedia that can be used within the program. There's many more features, but I think that gives you a sense of the type of program that, our students are using at the university, and many of our students are already accustomed to using in junior high and our senior high schools.
Somebody asked, can you share what TikTok is and how helpful can it be helpful in teaching?
Okay, so TikTok is a program that many of the children are using to sing and dance, and they create these little videos and share them with each other. I personally haven't used it in teaching yet, but I have noticed in the social media feed that there was one where a principal with some of the office staff created a TikTok just to send out to the parents and children as a way to communicate with them and let them know that they're thinking about them and miss them very much. So, is there a possibility? I'm sure there are, and there's probably many teachers that have figured out ways to use many of these different applications for learning purposes as well. What I do know is that children find it really fun to use. They're connecting with their peers in using this. And so I think, the keeping the connections, especially in this time of physical distancing, is so important.
Is Alberta Ed providing any support to smaller school boards around D2L and Zoom? This one participant's asked, saying that their school board is stuck on using Google Classroom and Meetup, but that doesn't seem to be the best option. Is there anything else that they should be looking at?
Mm-hmm. So I'm not sure if Alberta Education is providing professional learning around that. Certainly, you know, I know many of my colleagues have been helping out smaller schools and districts that have been asking for support. And so, you know, we're here to help you as well. So please do let us know. I know D2L has been providing support, so they have a lot of online videos and tutorials that can be used, and Zoom as well. There are a lot of already created how-to documents and videos that can be accessed. But certainly, you know, reach out if you know, if you're looking for support. And I know, as I said, in Workland School of Education, many colleagues that are happy to provide that support.
Right. So what you're saying is that the University of Calgary, the Workland School, is a resource for teachers and for parents potentially to sort of deal with some of these challenges. Well, thank you. Thank you for, maybe there's a link that you could also add to your blog site about getting in touch with people in that regard. I have a question. How do you see this situation that we're facing today as permanently changing the way education's delivered after we come out of this?
And that's a good question. I don't have a crystal ball to look ahead to see what, you know, what changes will happen because of this. What I do know is that already I have graduate students that are either in program or coming to us to work on their doctorates that are already thinking about the potential for research in this area and to examine how this type of situation will impact learning in future. So I too am curious as to what this will bring in the learning landscape. From my own personal experience, transitioning from being a K-12 classroom teacher to teaching in higher education and teaching a lot of online courses, I found that the teaching in online courses and designing online courses has made my face-to-face and classroom teaching even better. So I've brought things that I've learned from the online to my face-to-face classes, which I would call blended classes. I would not call any of the classes that I now teach as being fully face-to-face. So there are definitely things that I've learned that I've brought to those classes, and you know, and things that I do differently now because of the online experience. So, you know, I'm curious if that will persist, and if you know, if we'll see some changes in our schools because of this opportunity.
I know a lot of universities are starting to use the flipped model, the flipped classroom model. How applicable is the flipped classroom model in the K-12 system?
So I'm actually just working on a study that is set to start in the fall around flipped learning in a junior high classroom. And, you know, in conversations with this teacher who's been experimenting with it this term, she's recognized already that because of her use of a flipped learning model with students that have English language learning challenges, that this has really helped in this transition to online learning for her particular class. And so, you know, I think the flipped model is, you know, definitely being used in research much more in higher education than I've seen it in K-12. However, there are instances of it being used in K-12 as well. And those teachers that have been creating videos or using already created videos and adding voiceovers and providing them to the students in advance of classes are transitioning quite nicely to now being able to provide support materials for the children in their classes. And so, you know, we'll see where that research takes us. I think it'll be interesting if we see more of that.
You mentioned earlier on about the canceling of the diplomas and the provincial achievement tests. I'm wondering if that also resets the clock on those, on the focus on those exams going forward in Alberta. What do you think?
I hope so. In talking to the former minister, Dave King, who, when the diploma exams came into place, and I've heard him speak, and I know he's posted about this as well, that, diploma exams have really been used for, what he never anticipated or expected they would have been used for. And he certainly didn't expect that they would still be around today. And so, so I wonder if this would be an opportunity to revisit that conversation and to determine, do we really need diploma exams? Do we need exams that are so costly in terms of administration and and so stressful on our children? Are there different ways that we could look at assessing where our children are at, assessing learning outcomes, so that we can provide important information for wherever the children decide to go after high school?
There's just at the other end of the spectrum, there was a question about providing recommendations for working while caring for children under 3. How do you stimulate them? What do you think is good? How much time during the day? I mean, obviously that's a balance too, because you've got to work and you've got a little one who needs your attention. Are there particular exercises or games or tools that you have that you would say use these to keep your child entertained, but also sort of exploring some boundaries?
Mm-hmm. And I would say, you don't need to go and buy new things. You probably already have a lot of toys at home and things that your children use. But I know that when my children were that age, they needed a lot more of my attention and time to be with them during the time that they were playing. And I know at that stage, if I was doing any of my work, it would take place when they were napping, or before they would wake up, or after they went to bed. It was really difficult to do any work during the awake times. And so again, that's where I think we really need to balance our expectations, to really be flexible with our colleagues, be flexible with our graduate students that we're working with, to know what their circumstances are, and make sure we have reasonable expectations for what the deliverables or outcomes might be.
Final question. I think there's a question about how you do in-class, for someone who does in-class training sessions for system navigation. And is Zoom the best tool? Do you have any other ideas in terms of trying to facilitate using the technology that's out there? Is something that you've seen a little bit better from a teaching aid than others?
And I'm not really big on promoting any single program or application. Certainly at the university, we're using Zoom. We have used other applications. I would say use what you're familiar with. So those that are familiar with using Google Hangouts, if that works with you, then, use that. If you're familiar with Google Classrooms or Zoom, then use the applications that you already have and that you're familiar with, so that you're not also adding the technology challenge to the stress that you might already have. I know that one of the things that we found in another research study where we were studying online courses is that, one of the biggest challenges for students is when they have the technological issues. And so if we can limit those technological issues by using the tools that they're already familiar with and already using, then I think that would also help us with decreasing the stress for everyone.
Thank you for that. And I just, we have a minute left. I just wanted to say thank you very much for your comments. I mean, we've all heard about the importance of flexibility, prioritizing goals, and what teachers want our kids to be doing while they're at home, using resources and not being afraid to reach out for further support. Screen time limits are okay. Make sure everybody gets a bit of a break, and teenagers get to sleep in a little longer. It's all good.
That's right.
Thank you very much for doing this for all of us. We really appreciate your time. And thanks for everybody for participating.
Thank you.
Thanks.